When I stepped through the old glass doors of Roswell-era tech, I half expected to see my grandfather's reflection in them. Crisp suit, clipboard in hand, ready to quiz me on torque tolerances or propeller geometry. But he was gone. And now I was here to keep a promise. My name is Lena Roswell. I'm 27. I live in an over-the-garage apartment in Silver Lake, with a mismatched kettle and 3 different mugs. And today, I stood in the cold lobby of the empire my grandfather built, surrounded by people who'd rather I stayed erased. The will reading was held in the old executive conference room. Thick walnut doors, leather chairs with faded piping, and a view of the private airstrip that used to be our playground. My mother sat at the head of the table, flawless as always in a cashmere turtleneck, her lips pressed into a flat, controlled line. Next to her, my father adjusted his Rolex like it was handcuffs, and across from them, Tess, my half-sister, polished, posed, and already smirking like she'd read the final page in advance. Mr. Gibbons, our family lawyer, cleared his throat and opened the folder. "Let's begin." He started with Tess. To Tess Roswell, he read, "I leave the Roswell Villa in Napa and the 1932 Lockheed Vega, the plane I loved most." Tess's smirk deepened. She didn't even pretend to be surprised. Next, my parents. To my daughter Catherine and her husband Alan, the grandfather clock from the showroom floor, and a donation of $100,000 to the Cal Poly Aerospace program in your names. My mother blinked, still unreadable. My father twitched like the number offended him. "And to Lena Roswell," Mr. Gibbons continued, eyes glancing up to meet mine, "I leave the remaining financial estate, including cash, stocks, and controlling interest in Roswell Aerotech. Estimated value, $38.9 million. No one breathed. Tess's smirk slid clean off her face. My father stood so fast his chair slammed into the wall. "Are you out of your mind?" he barked at Mr. Gibbons, though we all knew who he was really yelling at. "This is a joke. This has to be some kind of sick." He snatched the oversized check Mr. Gibbons had placed on the table and held it up like evidence at a trial. "You think this girl, this dropout, deserves any of it?" My mother reached for the envelope beside the check. Her fingers trembled, just slightly, as she opened it. A single page, handwritten. To my granddaughter, the only one who ever looked up, not down. She tore it in half. My father struck a match. I watched silently as the check curled into smoke in his palm and fell into the tray he'd yanked off the table. Tess gasped, but didn't speak. Maybe she thought I'd scream. Maybe they all expected me to cry or plead. I didn't. I reached inside my coat pocket and touched the thin stack of documents I'd hidden there. Originals, notarized, final. The decoy had done its job. Let them burn what they think they control. My grandfather taught me better. As the ashes settled, I stood and tucked my chair back in. "Thanks for the show," I said softly, meeting each of their eyes. I walked out of the conference room without looking back, past the glass doors and into the pale winter light. And for the first time since he died, I didn't feel alone. I was 19 the day I stopped existing. Not physically. I was very much alive, hauling textbooks across campus and learning to stretch a $20 grocery bill into a week's worth of meals. But to my family, I was gone. It started with a fight. Well, less a fight and more of a quiet ultimatum. My father had just come back from a business trip, and I was waiting at the dinner table, acceptance letter in hand, hoping maybe, just maybe, he'd smile. "I got into the institute," I said. "The one in Santa Fe, the art restoration program." He didn't even look up from his phone. "You mean you're still not going to Stanford?" "I already deferred," I said, voice trembling. "I'm not doing aerospace. I never was." That was the moment. He set the phone down, folded his hands, and looked at me like I was a stranger. My mother didn't speak at all. Just picked at her salad like I'd told her I was moving to Mars. By the weekend, my bedroom had been emptied. I came home to find the walls bare, my desk gone. In its place, a tasteful little love seat and a lamp shaped like a lighthouse. "It's more functional," my mother said when I asked. "You weren't really using it anyway." I slept in my car that night. It wouldn't be the last time. They didn't scream. They didn't disown me in some dramatic, teary scene. That would have made it too real. No. They did it quietly, like brushing lint off a jacket. They removed my name from the family phone plan. Bank access? Gone. Health insurance? We'll revisit it when you come to your senses. And Tess? She loved it. You'll grow out of this, she told me once, sipping from a smoothie I'd bought. Restoring old paintings is cute, but it's not a real career. I stopped responding after that, but I didn't stop. I found a windowless apartment with tile floors and a faucet that coughed when you turned it too hard. I worked nights cleaning classrooms and weekends retouching damaged canvases from flea markets. I lived on boxed rice and free museum passes. That's when the letters started. Always in the same handwriting. Always in the same envelope. Lena, survival isn't weakness. It's the first proof of strength. Love, G. At first I thought it was some generic encouragement. Then the bank notifications came in. Small deposits, 100 here, 50 there. Enough to keep the lights on, to buy decent brushes, to cover a cracked filling when I couldn't chew. He never mentioned it on the phone. He never asked for thanks. He just gave. For 5 years, he wrote me every month. Sometimes just a sentence, sometimes a sketch on a napkin, but it was always there. His quiet way of saying, "You still exist." After he died, I found his last note folded inside a weathered envelope, placed in my mailbox the week before the funeral. They tried to erase you, but I see you. Keep going. I did. Because I had no other choice, and because he believed I would. It started with a declined transaction. I was at the grocery store, standing in front of the self-checkout, a bag of oranges and a box of oatmeal on the scale, when my card flashed red. Declined. I tried again. Same result. The clerk gave me that too polite smile, the one reserved for people who might bolt. I paid in cash, walked outside, and sat on the curb, heart thudding. It wasn't a money issue. I had funds. Modest, sure, but enough. Something was wrong. Back at home, I called the bank. 5 minutes on hold. 10. Then a bored voice finally answered. "I'm sorry, Ms. Roswell. That account has been closed. You're listed as deceased." I actually laughed. "Excuse me?" "Yes, it says here. Certificate of death filed 8 months ago. Social Security number deactivated. Do you have legal documentation proving otherwise? I'm literally speaking to you right now." Silence. Then a click. I was transferred. An hour later, I had an appointment with the DMV and a sick feeling I couldn't shake. The DMV clerk was kind, in that detached post-lunch shift kind of way. She typed my name, squinted, then looked up slowly. Yeah, this is flagged. You're deceased, officially. There's a file with your name, birthday, social security number, cause of death. Accident. What kind of accident? She shook her head. It doesn't say, but the record's sealed. You're not supposed to exist anymore. I stumbled outside into the sunlight, barely registering the people passing me on the sidewalk. My hands were shaking. My mouth had gone dry. I wasn't just forgotten. I'd been buried. Across the street, someone was standing beneath a rusted bus stop sign. Long wool coat, a familiar burgundy scarf wrapped tight around her neck. My mother's scarf. The one she claimed she lost at a gala years ago. The figure didn't move, just stood there, watching. When I blinked, they were gone. Back at my apartment, I pulled every one of my grandfather's letters from the shoebox beneath my bed. I laid them out across the floor, oldest to newest. At first I didn't notice it, the pattern, but then I saw the date on the last envelope, the one he sent just before he died. It was addressed differently, not Lena Roswell, just L.R. Private. Inside was no letter, just a single line scribbled on a business card. Check the lining. I ran to the coat he'd given me on my 25th birthday. Dark green, military style, lined with brushed satin. My fingers found the tear at the seam almost instantly. Tucked deep inside was a USB drive, small and unmarked. I plugged it into my laptop with a shaking hand. There were documents, dozens, transfers, account authorizations, a scanned notarized will, and one line that sent a chill down my spine. Roswell estate fully transferred to Lena Roswell, effective April 12, 2020. That was 10 months ago, a full 2 months before I was declared legally dead. It was a trap. The fake check, the letter, the public meltdown at the will reading, all of it had been bait, and my family took it. I leaned back against the couch, heart racing, They thought they burned everything. But the real fire hadn't even started yet. The key had sat on my dresser for nearly a decade. Brass, heavy, oddly old-fashioned, like something out of a spy film. My grandfather gave it to me on my 18th birthday, wrapped in tissue paper and tucked inside a hollowed-out aviation textbook. Not yet, he'd said with a wink. But one day, you'll know where it goes. That day came on a Tuesday. I drove 2 hours north into a nowhere town with a population sign so faded it looked hand-painted. The address he scribbled in the inside cover of one of his letters brought me to a squat brick building with no signage, just a keypad and a steel door. I half expected nothing to happen when I knocked. Instead, the door buzzed. A receptionist, if you could call her that, took one look at the key I held up and nodded me through. No questions, no forms, just a walk down a narrow hallway and an unmarked elevator that rattled slightly on the way down. The vault was cold, not in a creepy, dimly lit way, more sterile. Rows of drawers, a camera in each corner, and a single security guard who pointed silently toward box 42. My key fit like it was born there. Inside, a leather file folder, a metal cash box, and another USB labeled in my grandfather's handwriting. Watch this first. I found an old desktop station near the guard desk and plugged it in. The screen flickered, then faded into a video, low res but unmistakable. My grandfather sat behind his old desk, hands clasped, expression serious. If you're watching this, then they went through with it, he said. They tried to erase you, just like I warned. He leaned back slightly, letting out a long breath. I built Roswell Aerotech from scratch. I saw everything, including what they became, your mother, your sister, your father. They were never after the company. They were after the control. And when I realized they feared you, not because you were weak, but because you saw them, I knew you were the only one who could handle what came next. He smiled then, just slightly. This isn't just money, Lena. It's memory. It's blood and blueprint and every battle I fought behind boardroom doors to keep this name from being sold like scrap. You don't just inherit wealth. You inherit the responsibility to remember. The screen went black. I sat still for a long time before I opened the file folder. Inside, notarized deeds to over a dozen parcels of land across the Southwest. A stamped certificate confirming my ownership of 60% of Roswell Aerotech's private shares, and an original cashier's check for $38 million issued to me under a corporate beneficiary trust, dated the week before I was declared dead. And in the cash box, a silver pen, an original birth certificate, and one more letter. You'll want to burn this one after you sign. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just stared at the name printed on the check. Mine. No edits, no errors, no question marks. They tried to erase me, and still, here I was. It started with a message, anonymous and direct. They're not after the money, they're after the signature. I reread it 3 times, trying to make sense of it. No name, no explanation. Just that single line sitting in my inbox like a warning bell that wouldn't stop ringing. By then, I already knew I was legally dead. But this meant something worse, that someone was still using me. I took the USB drive from the vault, the one labeled with the estate transfer and legal confirmations, and opened it again. This time, I looked closer at the corporate documents. There were contracts tucked in the folder that I hadn't noticed before. Sales agreements, land transfers, internal authorization forms from Roswell Aerotech's board. Every one of them bore my name, my signature. Except I never signed a single one. The forgery wasn't even subtle. It was bold, confident, too perfect. A consistent replica copied from who knows where and pasted across dozens of legal documents. They weren't just using my name. They were selling off my grandfather's company, piece by piece. And since I was legally dead, there was no way to contest the transactions in my name, unless I proved I was alive and the real heir. They thought they were smart. They thought by wiping me out on paper, they could use the ghost of my identity to authorize anything they wanted. But they didn't know what I had. The next day, I made a quiet visit to the Roswell Aerotech headquarters. I didn't go inside. Just sat across the street in a borrowed car, watching people move in and out. Suits, staff, a few board members I recognized from old photos. Then I saw it, the sleek black car Tess always drove, pulling into the side lot reserved for executives. I didn't need confirmation after that. Back home, I dug into the last batch of files from the vault. Inside one of the estate folders was a single page marked with a post-it note. If they sell it, follow the joke. The attached file listed a set of property codes and old land deeds, mostly unremarkable, except for one plot with a coded tag in the system under the name Murray Featherstone. Murray Featherstone wasn't real. It was a joke between me and my grandfather from when I was 13. We'd watched some ancient war documentary, and when the narrator announced a ridiculous British spy name, I had laughed so hard I choked. "You ever need to hide something," he said, smiling at the TV, "use a name no one takes seriously." So I followed the trail. That name, Featherstone, was tied to a rural property 3 hours outside Albuquerque. No listed phone number, no visible owner, just a dusty storage unit and a mailbox tucked into a crumbling cinder block wall. The next morning, I drove there. The unit door groaned when I opened it. Inside, the air was stale with old paper and cedar. Boxes lined the walls, but in the center sat a single object on a steel table, a fireproof briefcase. On top was a worn envelope, and scrawled across the front in my grandfather's distinct, sharp handwriting, "Final confirmation enclosed. Your name, not theirs." They forged the signature, but I was about to reclaim the pen. The hinges creaked when I unlatched the briefcase. It was heavier than it looked, like it held more than just papers, like it held weight. Inside was order, everything arranged in layers, neatly stacked. First, a birth certificate, crisp, unmarked, untouched by the bureaucratic edits that had mistakenly rendered me dead. My full name, Lena Roswell, centered in bold black print, surrounded by the signatures of the very people now pretending I didn't exist. I stared at it for a long time. Then I found the envelope labeled "Letters, Do Not Discard." Inside were dozens, maybe 50, all written in the looping, deliberate handwriting I'd know anywhere. My grandfather's words were steady, but this time different. They weren't short notes of encouragement like before. These were instructions, memories, testimonies. One read, "They will say you're unstable, that you faked your death or never lived at all. They will try to erase your roots so they can steal what you were always meant to grow. But roots run deep, and I've buried them well." The next letter was dated 1 week before his death. "You think I didn't know what they'd do? I built this empire in boardrooms filled with men who'd stab you mid-toast. I raised your mother in the same house where I taught her to lie with a smile. But you always saw past the surface. You saw the rust under the shine. That's why I picked you." I had to pause after that one. I wasn't crying, not exactly, but there was a pressure behind my eyes. A slow, quiet wave pressing against everything I'd tried to hold in. I kept digging. At the bottom of the briefcase, beneath the letters, was a new will, signed, notarized, stamped, dated 5 weeks after the official death certificate filed in my name. The legal heir, Lena Roswell, sole recipient, sole controller of the estate. Attached was a letter addressed to any court, any judge, any blood relative who tries to dispute this. My grandfather had anticipated the worst of them and left nothing to chance. The last item was tucked inside a protective sleeve, aged paper with a raised seal. I lifted it out slowly. It was the deed to the original Roswell family estate, the one built in the 1940s, the cornerstone of the company, the land everything else had been built on. I ran my fingers across my name, etched at the bottom, owner Lena Roswell. That's when I felt it, the shift. Not anger, not fear, not even triumph, just clarity. All this time, I thought I'd been fighting to be seen. But I wasn't invisible. I was just inconvenient to people who only valued what they could exploit. But he had seen me. Always. And now, holding the paper, the letters, the birth certificate, I saw myself again too. I wasn't erased. I was restored. Court didn't feel like the movies. There were no dramatic outbursts or grand gasps, just ticking clocks, shuffling papers, and the low hum of quiet tension. But that morning, as I sat beside my attorney, I could feel the weight of every lie they'd told tightening around their necks like a slow, invisible noose. Tess sat at the defense table in a sharp gray pantsuit, flipping her hair like she was at a press conference. My parents were beside her, their lawyer whispering into a folder while my mother stared straight ahead like this was beneath her. The judge adjusted his glasses and glanced over the paperwork again. "Miss Roswell, this is highly irregular," he said, addressing me directly. "You were declared legally deceased 9 months ago, and yet here you are." I stood. "Yes, Your Honor, because I never died." Our attorney, Ms. Nolan, quiet but surgical, rose and passed the judge a binder marked Exhibit A through F. "Your Honor," she said, "we are submitting proof that Miss Lena Roswell was falsely declared deceased through a death certificate filed without her knowledge or consent. We also submit notarized evidence that Ms. Roswell was the sole beneficiary of the Roswell financial estate, per an updated will filed after the false death certificate." She clicked the remote. The screen behind her lit up with a paused video. My grandfather's face filled the screen, clear, firm, and alive. "Your Honor, this is a pre-recorded video message from the late Mr. Franklin Roswell," she said. "He created this as legal testimony in the event his estate was contested." The judge nodded. "Proceed?" She pressed play. My grandfather leaned into the camera, voice steady, eyes sharper than I'd ever seen. "If you're watching this, it means my granddaughter Lena is fighting the battle I always feared she'd have to. Let me make it clear. I left my estate to her. Not out of charity, not out of guilt, but because she earned it. She withstood what the rest of them didn't even bother to notice. Betrayal wrapped in politeness, erasure by silence." Tess shifted in her chair. My father went pale. My mother's mouth parted, but nothing came out. "I did not authorize a death certificate. I did not approve the use of her signature on any documents. And I assure you," he continued, "if anyone in this courtroom filed those papers to profit from my legacy, I hope this message costs them every dollar they tried to steal." The video ended. The room was silent. The judge leaned back, arms folded. "I've seen enough." He turned toward Tess and my parents. "Effective immediately. The court is freezing all financial activity under the Roswell estate, pending a full investigation. Any assets transferred using Lena Roswell's forged signature will be examined for criminal liability." Then he looked at me. "And as of this ruling, Ms. Lena Roswell is hereby reinstated, legally, financially, and personally, as the sole heir to the Roswell estate." I nodded once. No smile, no gloating. I hadn't come here to win. I came to be seen, and for the first time in years, I was. Tess messaged me 3 days after the ruling. "Can we talk? Just us. One coffee, no drama." I stared at the text for a long time. Part of me wanted to delete it without replying. Another part, the old part, was curious. The part that used to wait for her to change. We met at a corner cafe in Burbank. Neutral ground. She chose a table near the window, already seated when I arrived. A half-empty cappuccino in front of her, and sunglasses on the table, like she was still trying to look unbothered. "Hey," she said, smiling like we were old friends. "Thanks for coming." I sat down but didn't return the smile. "You've got 15 minutes. She sighed and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, her go-to nervous tick. "I just wanted to say, I didn't know about the forged signature. I didn't know about the death certificate. That wasn't me." "Right," I said flatly. "I'm serious." Her voice cracked a little. "Dad and Mom handled all that. I was just following their lead." "Following their lead," I repeated, staring at her. "When you were cashing dividends from the company, using my name. When you stood there and let them burn a fake check to humiliate me. That wasn't their lead. That was you." She opened her mouth to argue, then stopped. "Okay," she admitted. "Maybe I didn't stop them, but I didn't forge anything." I swear I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms. "And what is it you want now, Tess?" Her lips pressed together, eyes darting toward the window before settling back on me. "I don't know," she said softly. "Maybe some kind of peace, closure." "Closure?" I said. "Or damage control," she flinched. "Lena, please, I know I screwed up, but I don't want us to hate each other forever." I looked at her, really looked at her. The flawless makeup couldn't cover the fatigue. The tight blazer couldn't hide how much she'd lost. She was unraveling, just slower than the rest. "I don't hate you," I said finally. "I just don't trust you. And I don't owe you anything. Not forgiveness, not comfort, and definitely not my attention." She blinked, stunned. "So that's it?" "That's it." Tess nodded, like she was trying to stay composed. "Okay," she whispered. "I guess I deserve that." I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and tapped the screen. The recording app had been running the entire time. Her eyes widened. "You were recording me?" "Sure was," I said, standing. "Just in case you ever forget what you admitted." She didn't speak. I didn't give her the chance. As I walked out of the cafe, the sun felt warmer than it had in weeks. I didn't feel angry or triumphant or even sad. I just felt done. At the next stoplight, I glanced at my phone. Subject: deed transfer confirmed recipient. Lena Roswell property, Roswell family estate. It was mine now, all of it. And I didn't have to say another word to prove it. I stood outside the courthouse for a long time after it ended. The building loomed behind me, all stone and silence. People rushed past on their way to wherever their lives pulled them next. But I stayed still, holding my phone up to snap a photo. The kind you post not for likes, but for proof. Caption: they tried to burn the legacy. I inherited the foundation. Then I slipped the phone into my pocket and turned toward the part no one had seen coming. A tiny studio in Echo Park, hidden behind a defunct laundromat. The paint was chipped, the door creaked, and the lock took 2 tries to catch. But it was mine, paid for in full under the name Lena Roswell. No edits, no proxies, no deceased status attached. The place was small, one big open room, cracked concrete floors, and a skylight that leaked just enough to make you respect the weather. The back wall had water stains. There was no furniture, no Wi-Fi, no insulation. It was perfect. I crossed the room and sat on the floor, legs folded under me. For the first time in months, I wasn't moving. I wasn't chasing a ghost version of myself or untangling forged documents. I wasn't waiting for someone else's permission to exist. This place wasn't for courtrooms or inheritance battles. It wasn't about the money. It was for something else. Creation. Art restoration had always been about more than technique. It was about seeing what was hidden underneath. Scratches, paint stripped away, corners damaged by time or neglect. Most people saw ruin. I saw potential. I reached into my bag and pulled out the final envelope I hadn't opened yet. The one I found taped under the studio's fuse box, marked in my grandfather's handwriting, "Start here." Inside was a folded blueprint of the studio layout, complete with scribbled annotations. Where to put the light table, the shelving system he mocked up himself. A little sketch of a rolling ladder with the note, "Add wheels." You always forget the wheels. Beneath that, a business license in my name. Roswell Restoration and Studio Works. No instructions, no pressure. Just a message at the bottom in faded ink. Make something they can't erase. I sat with that for a while, not because it hurt, but because it didn't. The weight had finally shifted. The court rulings, the letters, the vault, the fireproof briefcase. All of it had been about proving I existed. But this place, this quiet, imperfect studio, was where I would live. No audience, no inheritance, just my hands, my tools, and whatever work came next. I leaned back, let the last light of the afternoon filter through the skylight, and breathed. For the first time in my life, I wasn't surviving someone else's legacy. I was building my own.